The cameras were rolling, the audience was laughing, until one unexpected comment turned everything sideways. Jasmine Crockett walked onto the stage expecting a standard interview, but within moments she was hit with sharp, unexpected insults. That stunned even the viewers at home. What happened next? No one saw it coming. In just a few words, she flipped the moment and left the room in silence. You won't believe how she turned live humiliation into unforgettable power. A public moment on live television can shape how people think, act, and respond. When someone steps into a talk show setting, especially one seen by millions, they enter a space filled with bright lights, quick conversations, and often surprising turns. In this case, the guest came to speak, to share ideas, or to represent something meaningful. But what followed was not an ordinary discussion. It turned into a moment of disrespect, done in real time, in front of an audience both in the studio and across the world. The situation quickly became more than just entertainment. It became a lesson. This guest walked onto the stage ready to engage in open conversation, just like most visitors on such shows. These platforms are often used to discuss social issues, current events, or personal journeys. There is usually some humor, some serious talk, and a flow that helps both the guest and host shine in their own ways. That's what many expected here. But the direction this interview took was unexpected. Instead of starting with kindness or thoughtful questions, the host launched the conversation with remarks that sounded more like personal attacks than genuine interest. Insults on live television don't always appear in loud or angry forms. Sometimes they are disguised as jokes or clever comments, but when someone is being laughed at, not laughed with, it becomes clear to viewers. In this case, the host made sharp remarks about the guest's appearance, background, or manner of speaking. Each sentence was aimed to spark laughter at the guest's expense, and though some in the audience chuckled, many could sense the discomfort. The guest, sitting in front of a large crowd and a host with a powerful reputation, had just been placed in a very difficult position. These kinds of live insults carry more weight than ordinary teasing. When one person controls the stage, the timing, and the microphone, the power imbalance is easy to see. The guest didn't have a team to defend her, no option to step off the set, and no warning of what was coming. It was one person against a system that gave full control to the other. And because this was happening live, the reactions had to be instant. There was no editing, no break, and no chance to reword anything. Every movement, every glance, and every word would be watched again and again through clips and replays. What made this situation even more important was the fact that the guest had walked in with respect and a readiness to contribute. She didn't expect flattery, but she expected fairness. She came prepared to talk about serious matters or to reflect on her experiences. Instead, she had to sit and listen as her host, someone who usually held the spotlight, used it to put her down. The situation became more than uncomfortable. It became unfair and deeply unprofessional. At that moment, the role of live television changed. It was no longer a simple show. It became a mirror showing how public figures treat their guests, especially when they believe the audience is on their side. It also showed how harmful words can feel when shared with millions, especially when spoken by someone who holds the stage. This moment pushed people to think, what is the true role of a host? Is it to uplift the conversation or to dominate it? Is it to make others feel welcome or to control how they are seen? This event reminded many viewers that just because something is happening on a popular platform doesn't mean it is right. The camera doesn't always capture truth. Sometimes it captures cruelty. And even though it can all be passed off as just entertainment, the effect of those words remains. For the person sitting in the guest chair, those insults live longer than the laughter that follows them. They stay in memories, they get repeated on social media, and they shape the public's view in real ways. When a guest faces public insult, it puts their strength and character to the test. But more importantly, it also tests the values of the audience. Will they laugh along? Will they stay silent? Or will they see what's really happening? Someone using their platform to harm rather than uplift. This was not just a moment on a show. It was a turning point in a conversation about dignity, fairness, and the real cost of public words. When people speak on live television, especially during interviews, there is usually an understanding that the conversation will be respectful, even if challenging. Guests prepare their thoughts and expect to be questioned or even pushed slightly on tough topics, but they still expect a basic level of decency. In the situation that unfolded on this particular broadcast, that basic respect was broken in a way that caught the guest and the audience by surprise. The words used were not gentle or curious. They came sharply, without warning, and in a way that changed the tone of the entire show from the very beginning. The first comment that started the chain of insults did not sound playful. It was direct and meant to cause discomfort. This was not the usual kind of teasing that sometimes happens during interviews. It was personal, as if the host had planned to create a moment that would spark attention, even at the cost of someone else's dignity. The guest was clearly not expecting this kind of treatment. Her expression, for a brief moment, revealed a hint of confusion, maybe even hurt. But there was no time to pause, no space to stop the show. The camera kept rolling, the audience waited for a reaction, and the host continued with another cutting remark. What made the moment even more intense was how quickly it escalated. One comment led to another, and each one seemed more pointed than the last. Instead of moving toward the actual subject of the conversation, or allowing the guest to explain her position on important topics, the discussion turned into a series of subtle attacks. The host focused on her appearance, her choice of words, and even her background in a way that seemed to invite laughter rather than thought. This wasn't about asking questions. It was about control. The conversation had turned into a test, not of knowledge, but of patience and self-respect. In these moments, many people freeze. It's difficult to think clearly when you are being mocked in front of millions. But this guest did not lash out or walk off the stage. She stayed calm, which made the insults even more visible to the viewers, because she didn't interrupt or fight back. The words coming from the other side stood alone, exposed and easy to judge. Viewers could see that she had not done anything to deserve this kind of treatment. She had come ready to speak, to engage, and to share her views. Instead, she was met with comments that tried to reduce her to something less. The surprise of these remarks wasn't just in what was said, it was also in where it happened. This was a place known for lighthearted interviews, dancing, and fun. People didn't expect conflict here, especially not the kind that targets someone personally. That is why the insults landed so strongly. The audience wasn't prepared for tension, and the guest certainly wasn't either. It turned a space that was supposed to be safe and enjoyable into something uncomfortable and unfair. Being insulted live is a very different experience than being insulted in private. On live television, every second is captured. Every word becomes a quote, and every look becomes a screenshot. The damage done in those moments doesn't fade away when the camera turns off. It spreads through social media, news outlets, and public conversations. And when the insults are unexpected, they leave an even deeper mark. The person on the receiving end does not get a chance to prepare or defend themselves in the moment. The shock alone is enough to create a pause, but the show keeps going, leaving them to recover while still trying to remain professional. This event showed just how powerful words can be, especially when spoken in a setting that gives one person full control. The guest had no script, no chance to edit her reply, and no idea that the conversation would turn in such a direction. The host, on the other hand, held the spotlight and the rhythm of the interview. By using that power to deliver direct, cutting remarks, the host turned a shared space into a one-sided confrontation. That kind of imbalance can silence people, but in this case, it ended up doing something else. It revealed how damaging such words can be, and how easily a person's image can be attacked when the setting allows no room for equal footing. In the middle of a live conversation where disrespect had already made its way into the room, it would have been understandable for the guest to react with anger or frustration. Many people, when insulted in front of others, especially on such a big stage, feel the pressure to push back quickly or defend themselves with sharp words. But in this case, something very different happened. The guest chose calmness. Instead of raising her voice or showing any sign of emotional weakness, she remained steady, thoughtful, and composed. This kind of control does not come easily, especially in a setting where emotions are high and pressure is constant. The lights are bright, the cameras are rolling, and an audience is watching every move. The situation was already tense due to the unexpected insults. Yet, the guest took a moment to breathe. She kept her posture straight, her voice clear, and her eyes focused. This wasn't a reaction driven by pride or fear. It was a decision to respond in a way that showed self-respect and inner strength, even while someone else was trying to make her feel small. Many people watching could feel the shift in the room. The insults had tried to make the guest look weak, but her calmness made the opposite happen. Her silence between the rude remarks was not empty. It was full of meaning. It showed that she would not be dragged into a verbal fight. She would not allow herself to be shaped by someone else's negative words. Instead, she used the silence as space to prepare her response. And when she finally spoke, her words were measured and intelligent. She didn't reply with more insults. She didn't try to embarrass the host in return. What she did was even more powerful. She responded with clarity, speaking in a way that made it impossible to ignore her presence. Her words were filled with purpose, not anger. They explained why the comments were wrong, but without shouting or blaming. She used real examples, careful language, and a calm tone to make her point. It became clear that she was not just offending. Herself, she was teaching a lesson. Staying composed in a public moment like that sends a message not only to the person causing harm, but also to everyone watching. It tells people that confidence is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It's found in the way a person holds themselves when others try to shake their foundation. The guest's actions reminded the world that power doesn't come from being the loudest person in the room. It comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let others define you. People often forget how hard it is to stay calm in the face of disrespect, especially when it is unexpected and public. But this moment became a powerful example of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand your feelings and choose how to respond, even when you are under pressure. The guest showed that she had a high level of this skill. She didn't just control her feelings, she also read the situation clearly. She knew that if she lost her cool, the attention might shift from the disrespect she faced to how she reacted. So instead of giving in to the moment, she stayed focused on the bigger picture. Her thoughtful response began to turn the energy of the room. The audience, which had been unsure how to respond at first, now leaned toward her. They saw her strength. They saw how she used her words not to attack, but to rise above. That shift in energy was not forced. It happened naturally, because truth and grace tend to attract support. Even those who may have laughed earlier began to recognize the weight of what was happening. This kind of reaction doesn't erase the insult, but it does change its effect. The person trying to cause harm ends up looking small, while the person who stands with dignity looks strong. That is exactly what took place. The guest took something meant to hurt and turned it into a moment of strength and learning, not just for herself, but for everyone watching. In a time where many people react quickly and harshly to conflict, this example reminded everyone of the lasting power of calm, intelligent, and composed behavior. The moment someone chooses to respond with calm strength instead of anger, something important happens. The power in the room begins to shift. At first, the insults may seem to take control. The person delivering them seems to have the upper hand, speaking louder, smiling wider, maybe even getting a few laughs from the audience. But when the person being insulted refuses to return that same energy and instead responds with intelligence and confidence, the focus begins to change. The one who was meant to be the target slowly becomes the leader in the conversation. That is exactly what happened in this situation. After facing several pointed and unexpected remarks on live television, the guest did not break under pressure. Instead of allowing the insults to define the tone of the interview, she carefully shaped the conversation in a new direction. Her voice stayed steady, her words were chosen with care, and her attitude showed that she was not afraid. She was not trying to match negativity with more negativity. She chose instead to stand in truth and to let her ideas, not her emotions, do the talking. What made this moment even more powerful was how she used reason, not revenge. She didn't respond to the insults by listing complaints or blaming anyone. She simply spoke in a way that exposed the weakness of the remarks themselves. Her logic was strong. She questioned the meaning behind the words she had just heard, asked why such comments were even part of the discussion, and gently guided the focus back to what really mattered. That redirection, done with poise, turned what could have been a harmful situation into a meaningful one. By doing this, she flipped the dynamic of the conversation. The host, who had seemed confident and in control at first, began to look uncomfortable. As the guest calmly stated her thoughts and held her ground, the audience began to listen more closely to her, not the person who had originally dominated the stage. The person who started the show in power was now being challenged, not with loud protests, but with quiet wisdom. And that kind of challenge is harder to ignore because it shines a light on behavior without shouting it down. This kind of moment teaches a very important lesson about handling disrespect. When someone tries to bring you down in front of others, your response is everything. Respond with anger, and the attention stays on the conflict. But respond with grace and clarity, and the attention shifts to the truth. That is what the guest achieved. She took control of the narrative without ever raising her voice. She made it clear that while others may try to control how you are seen, they cannot control your mind, your voice, or your strength unless you let them. The response she gave was not only about herself. It spoke to something larger. It told viewers that anyone, no matter where they come from, has the right to be respected when they step into a public space. It showed that intelligence can be a shield and a sword at the same time, defending one's dignity while also cutting through false ideas or unfair treatment. Her reaction turned a personal attack into a public lesson. People watching were not just entertained, they were educated. As the conversation continued, it was clear that the host began to feel the pressure. The energy had changed. Laughter had faded. The crowd was more reflective now. The guest's calm responses had made people think instead of laugh. That shift happened not because she fought back, but because she stood firm. She reminded everyone that dignity has its own kind of power, and that truth spoken without anger can be even stronger than the loudest insult. In turning the situation around, the guest showed not only personal strength but also communication skill. She kept control of her emotions, focused on her message, and made sure her words were not wasted. Each sentence served a purpose. Each answer gave clarity. The result was a moment that challenged the way disrespect is often treated in public spaces. Rather than letting it pass or responding with equal force, she reshaped it into something thoughtful. And in doing so, she didn't just protect herself, she led by example. After the live interview ended, many viewers were left thinking about what they had just seen. At first, the conversation had seemed like any other television moment, full of jokes, quick remarks, and the usual back and forth. But something had changed along the way. A line had been crossed. Someone had been insulted not once but several times in front of a live audience, and what was meant to be lighthearted quickly became uncomfortable. But more importantly, the way the guest handled it stayed in people's minds long after the show was over. Instead of letting the insults define her, she responded with strength, calmness, and intelligence. And that response became the focus of conversations everywhere. People on social media, news websites, and even classroom discussions began to talk about what happened. They weren't just repeating the rude comments that had been said. They were pointing out how powerful her reaction was. They were talking about how she stood up for herself without shouting, how she stayed respectful while being disrespected, and how she showed everyone that self-control is not weakness, it's wisdom. This reaction did more than impress the audience. It caused many people to reflect on their own behavior and expectations. Some viewers who had laughed during the show later admitted that they felt uncomfortable once they realized how unfair the treatment had been. Others said they had learned something from the way the guest handled the moment. People began to understand that words spoken in public, especially on television, can have deep effects. They can hurt, inspire, or educate. In this case, the guest's response opened eyes and minds. The person who had made the remarks may not have expected the response to go this way. Often, when someone says something rude or insulting on a large stage, they expect to get attention, laughter, or support. But in this case, it backfired. Instead of becoming more popular or praised, they faced strong public criticism. Viewers started asking hard questions. Why were those comments made? What purpose did they serve? Why was the guest treated like that? These questions were not just about this one show. They became part of a larger discussion about how people in power use their voices, and how guests, especially women, people of color, or anyone with a different background, are sometimes treated unfairly in public spaces. As these conversations spread, it became clear that something important had taken place. The guest had not only protected her own dignity, she had also changed the way people thought about public respect. She showed that when someone refuses to be brought down by rudeness and instead stands with grace, it sends a powerful message. That message is remembered. It teaches people how to act, how to think, and how to treat others better. She didn't just stop the insult, she turned it into a lesson. In the days and weeks after the event, many young people especially found strength in what she had done. Students, teachers, and even professionals began using her example in their own conversations. Some said they would now handle criticism differently. Others said they finally understood the value of staying calm in hard moments. Her actions became more than just a reaction. They became a model for others. This shift was also felt by those in the media world. Other hosts, writers, and entertainers started paying more attention to how they speak to their guests. Some even apologized for past behavior. Some viewers began demanding better from the shows they watched. They didn't want people to be mocked or bullied for entertainment. They wanted real conversation, real respect, and real leadership. All of this started from one moment, one live interview where someone chose not to fall apart, but to stand firm. In the end, the guest's handling of the situation created real change. Not with a fight, not with loud protests, but with calm words and steady confidence. She made people see what they had missed before. She made someone who thought they were in control realize that power does not come from the microphone or the stage. It comes from how we treat others. Her quiet strength turned the spotlight back where it belonged, and it reminded the world that every voice matters, especially the ones that speak with honesty, clarity, and purpose.